This video tutorial I will explain web service endpoint for get user with addresses, and it is an example of one-to-many relationship. Here you can see users table. It has user related columns, and here you can see addresses table, and it has addresses related columns, and primary key of users table is related to address table. So it is one-to-many relationship. Basically, one user can have many addresses. And here you can see the type. Type can be a shipping address or a billing address, like that. Now we will see the example. Here you can see the class user controller, which is REST controller. And it has get user method, which accept user ID. And user ID is public user ID. And this method returns user REST. And to call this method, we have to use get method, and the path variable ID will be mapped to this user ID. And this method produces either JSON or XML. And in this method, what I am doing is I am passing user ID to get user by user ID method of user service object. And this method returns user DTO object. Then I am creating a model mapper object, and using map method of model mapper object, I am copying user DTO property values to user REST object. And this method returns user REST object, and that user REST object I am returning to the caller. Now we will see the user DTO class. It has user related properties and a list of address DTO. And address DTO class has address related properties. Next we will see user REST class. It has user related properties and list of addresses REST. And this class has address related properties. Next we will see user service interface. User service interface has get user by user ID method, which accept user ID, and this method returns user DTO. And this method is abstract method. Implementation of this method is there in the user service impl class. And here you can see user service impl class, which implements user service interface. And here you can see the implementation of get user by user ID method, which accept user ID. And here what I am doing is using find by user ID method of user repository. I am getting user entity object based on the user ID. And if user entity object is null, then it will throw user not found exception. And if user entity object is there, then what I am doing is I am creating a model mapper object. Then using map method of model mapper object, I am copying user entity property values to user DTO object. And this method returns user DTO object that I am returning back to the controller. Now we will see user entity class. Here you can see user entity class, and it is mapped to users table. And it has user related properties and a list of address entity. Open this, and address entity class is related to addresses table, and it has addresses related properties. And now we will see users table and addresses table. And here you can see users table. It has one record related to the user Arun. And in addresses table, there are two records are there, and this is the primary key of user table. So there are two records are there which are related to primary key ID 1. This is the primary key which is referred here. Now we will see user repository interface. Here you can see user repository interface, and we have applied repository annotation. It has find by email method and find by user ID method. And this repository class is responsible for CRUD operations. Now I am going to start the application in debug mode. Application has been started. Now I am going to send request to this login URL to get public user ID and JWT token of particular user. And in the body of the request, I am sending email as arun@yahoo.com and password as pass123. HTTP method is post. Click on send, and we got a successful response. Click on headers, and here we got the user ID of Arun, and this is public user ID. And also we got JWT token in the authorization header. Copy this public user ID, paste here, and copy the JWT token, and in authorization header paste the JWT token. And I'm going to send request to this URL, and HTTP method is get. Click on send, and request reached here. And here we got the output. We got user information related to Arun, and array of addresses, billing address and shipping address. Suppose if we send wrong user ID, then we will see what happens. It throws user not found exception, and here we got user not found exception for this particular user ID. You can get Java source code link for each video in the description section of the video. Here you can see the description section. Click on show more, and here you can see the Java source code links. Click on these links to get the Java source code.